Shatter the Night, a Detective Gemma Monroe mystery. Book 4, by Emily Littlejohn. Narrated by Harper Landry. Prologue. The night was full of terrible things, shrouded creatures with dagger-sharp teeth, and ghostly beings that seemed to float on air, their sneaker-clad feet hidden under long white sheets pilfered from linen closets all over town. The creatures moved quickly, freely. The night belonged to them. It was Halloween, and the quaint mountain town of Cedar Valley, Colorado, held more than tricks and treats. There was a dark energy, a dark spirit, summoned from the past that moved through the roaming packs of shrieking children. No one saw it, of course, or likely even felt it. We lead self-absorbed lives, after all. We rarely notice when forces of darkness crouch in our shadows. It was only later that I would be able to name the energy, name it, know it for what it was, and direct my rage and grief at it in equal parts. It was evil, and it had crept into our town unannounced and unwelcome, though not unexpected. Towns, villages, they're living things, and like attracts like. We had summoned the evil to our town just as surely as if we had mailed an invitation. We just didn't know it yet, and by the time we did know it, the damage would already be done. People would be killed, lives would be changed, and Cedar Valley would never be the same again. Chapter 1. Halloween. Since becoming a cop 6 years prior, I'd grown to dread the 31st day of October. I could no longer believe the holiday was simply a night of innocent fun. I'd been witness to desecrated graves and smashed pumpkins, violent bar brawls, and deadly DUIs. The night gave liberty to all sorts of spooks and ghouls, not only encouraging them to come out and play, but practically daring them not to. I was also a parent, though, and slowly learning that Halloween was a night I needed to tolerate, if not someday even embrace. My daughter, Grace, was nearly a year old, and already she was captivated by the glowing pumpkins and toddler-sized spiderwebs that adorned front porches and yards all over town. Luckily, because Grace was so young, my fiancé, Brody Sutherland, and I still had full control over what she wore. He wanted to dress her as a witch, while I was leaning toward a cute bunny. After a heated discussion in the back aisle of a costume shop on Colfax in Denver, where the three of us had gone for a quick weekend getaway in late September, we split the difference and paid $40 for a zombie llama costume. It was as ridiculous as it sounded. By the time we got her ears on, Grace looked like a rabid camel. But I'm nothing if not stubborn, and by God, we were going to get our money's worth. Brody threw on an old monkey suit, and I slipped a pair of cat ears over my dark hair and called it good. We'd been out an hour. It was well past dusk, and we were nearly done trick-or-treating. The sky had turned a violent deep purple, a shade of eggplant that seemed both ominous and watchful. The full moon was still low, gradually beginning its climb up past the clouds. We were lucky. Though the forecast had predicted an early morning snowfall, none had come, and the night was merely cold instead of both cold and snowy. Cedar Valley, like most mountain towns in Colorado, was both blessed and cursed with a population that was widely spread out. Even our nearest neighbors in the canyon were a good quarter-mile away. And so, every Halloween, the town's city council sponsored a Spooks Night Out. Up and down Main Street, merchants and shop clerks decorated their storefronts and competed to see who could give out the most coveted treats. This year, word on the street was that Old Man Brewer, at the bookshop, had a seemingly endless supply of full-size candy bars. We reached the end of Main Street, where the businesses faded into stately residential homes and low-slung bungalows. Grace was sleepy, her eyes nearly shut. It was quieter here, with the bulk of the trick-or-treaters still to the north. Brody adjusted his monkey suit and moved Grace higher on his shoulder. "What do you say? It's been a long evening." It had, but we had one more stop to make. I promised Caleb we would come by. He's dying to see Grace in costume. Anyway, it's just up here. The small, tidy, single-story red brick bungalow was set back from the street on a quarter-acre lot. A gleaming white Mercedes sedan, parked along the sidewalk, got an appreciative whistle from Brody. Together we read the placard mounted on the black wrought-iron fence. Montgomery and Sons, Estate Planning and Legal Services. Though I and everyone in town knew there were no sons to be found inside. There was only retired Judge Caleb Montgomery, and a part-time paralegal who favored heavy gray cardigans, even in the heat of summer, and smelled incongruously of coconuts and tropical sunscreen. We pushed open the gate, wincing as the rusty bolts screeched, and stepped onto a narrow path that led from the gate to the front door. Caleb, or most likely his wife, Edith, had lined the path with carved pumpkins. They glowed, lit from within by tea lights. The door opened slowly as we reached the front porch. Caleb Montgomery greeted us with a smile and a bowl of hard butterscotch candies. Come in," he called softly, noting the nearly sleeping Grace in Brody's arms. "A rabid camel? How original. Wherever did you find a costume like that?" I shrugged. Colfax, of course. "Beautiful car, Caleb," Brody said, and shook the older man's hand. "Early Christmas present?" Caleb grinned. "You could call it that. A man's gotta live a little, right?" "Absolutely." The house was small. The front living area had been converted into a reception area, and the 2 bedrooms turned into Caleb's office and an office for his paralegal. In the rear of the house, closed French doors likely led to a kitchen, bathroom, and perhaps a closet or 2. A small white dog dressed in a bee costume darted toward us. The dog's bark was all Grace needed to perk up. She squealed with delight and then fussed in Brody's arms until he relented and set her down. The dog fell over with happiness, squashed its tiny wings, and offered up its pale speckled belly for rubs. "When did you get a dog?" I asked. "I didn't. It's the neighbors. But Cricket, the dog, prefers to hang out with me. He's highly intelligent that way. I'll take him home before I leave for the night." We watched dog and baby play for a few moments. Then Caleb cleared his throat. "May I speak to you a moment, Gemma? In private?" He gestured to his office. I followed him, smiling at the white lab coat he wore. The retired judge had always reminded me of Albert Einstein, and his shock of white hair and matching mustache. The costume he wore now only served to reinforce the image. Once we were inside his office, Caleb gently closed the door and slipped into the enormous chair behind his desk. A slight man, he was nearly swallowed by the leather and brass-studded throne. He rubbed at his face. "This life, it's exhausting, isn't it? When I was a kid, I was terrified of dying. Now the thought of living forever is enough to make me want to scream. Mankind was created with an expiration date, and for good reason. Our hearts are too soft, our emotions too brittle to go on forever." I took a seat across from him in one of the 2 guest chairs. A single 9x12 manila envelope lay on the mahogany desk, and Caleb stared at it, falling silent. For the first time, I felt a sense of trepidation at what he might wish to discuss. It was unlike him to be especially morose or sentimental. Seeing him this way was unsettling. It was almost as though he were afraid.